Many years ago, I was challenged to read the book of Proverbs on a daily basis. And so for several years, I did that. There are 31 Proverbs, Proverbs 31, yeah. There are 31 Proverbs, and so you can just choose every day to read, like today is the 22nd, and so you'd read Proverbs 22 today. And so for several years, I did that. So every 12 months, I would read the Proverbs, 12 times. And in there's tons of good information. Proverbs generally are ways to encourage and instruct you in your life. But sometimes it's difficult to figure out how they apply to our life today. We're in the book of 1 Samuel. We've been in the book of 1 Samuel. We will be in the book of 1 Samuel for a little bit longer still. But this is a wonderful example of the book of Proverbs being illustrated. One of the most common proverbs that you'll see in the book of Proverbs deals with the foolish and the wise. And what does the foolish person do? What does the wise person do? What sets them apart? And which one are you going to be? My encouragement for you today is that you would choose to be the wise person in the story. We see the story very clearly in 1 Samuel 25 that draws a line of separation between those who are wise and those who are foolish. 1 Samuel 25 starts off, though, with kind of a tragic note, just a one-verse note in verse 1 of chapter 25, and it says that Samuel, the prophet, died, and Israel mourned for his death. And so that was a big deal. Remember, David is running around, hiding mostly from Saul. He's just been given a reprieve, but he's still not sure it's safe to be around Saul at this time. And so he's out in the wilderness, and then he goes down to this place in Paran, and he meets a guy named Nabal. Nabal, the name Nabal means fool or foolish one. Not a great name for your child. We probably wouldn't name our kids that, right? That's not aspirational for what we want. But Nabal's parents knew what sort of child he was going to be. Perhaps it was a nickname that he acquired through years of being a fool. But regardless, this foolish person had made a lot of money. And sometimes we see that today, right? Sometimes it's the dumbest person that was in your school that has somehow become the most affluent person among you. And you think, Lord, this doesn't seem just or right, that the fool is rewarded while the wise is struggling. God's ways are not our ways. Nabal is wealthy. He has a wife named Abigail, and Nabal has herds and herds of sheep and goats. And David finds his way out to the area that Nabal is running his sheep and his goats, and he basically sets up a security force for Nabal. He protects the shepherds from being attacked. He protects the sheep from being lost. And so he's the wall between the world who may want to come and take sheep from shepherds. And so him and his army are out there just sort of as a wall. And every year or so, they would go down and they would shear the sheep. This was a festival. You'll see this in the ancient world. Anytime there's a lot of hard, dirty work, it turns into an opportunity for people to get together and party as well. And so they're shearing the sheep, and so the men that are the shepherds and Nabal's servants are down there. They're shearing the sheep. And David hears about this and sends someone to go and ask Nabal, can we have a little bit of the feast food? Can we possess a little bit of the food that from this feast, since we've been so good to you for all of this time? And now we get a proper introduction to who Nabal is. Verse 9 of 1 Samuel chapter 25. Read with me. It says, when David's young men came, they said this, basically asked Nabal for these things, to Nabal in the name of David. And then they waited. And Nabal had answered David's servants, who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who come from I do not know where? So David's young men turned away and came back and told him, David, all of this. And David said to his men, every man strap on his sword, and every one of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword. And about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. Okay, so David asks pretty simply to share in the rewards of what the shearers were taking part of. He felt like he had done his part of protecting Nabal's flock, and when he sends his young men to go ask Nabal just for a portion to eat and to celebrate God's provision for them, Nabal responds acting as if he has never heard of this man David, as if he has no idea that David has been protecting his shepherds. And in fact, he insults David consistently. Who is this man? Who is this son of Jesse? There are many servants breaking away from their masters. Right? He's diminishing David, and David is reported back this, and David responds with what we would call anger. That would be the emotion we would say he has, right? He says, guys, grab your weapons. We're going to go kill us some people. And so they all grab their swords. 400 of them are ready to go down and make war against the fool Nabal. I want you to know, foolish people invite wrath. In fact, if we're going to be flipping back and forth to Proverbs, so you can keep your thumb there. If you flip to Proverbs chapter 18, we'll see how Nabal is beginning to illustrate the Proverbs that we see in the Bible. Proverbs 18, verses 6 and 7 says this. It says, a fool's lips walk into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul. So Nabal is illustrating what Solomon is going to write many years later, that a fool's mouth, right, invites wrath. A beating is at the hands that comes to the one who is foolish, right? And that's exactly what Nabal does. Nabal could have said, yes, I have something to share, or even he could have said, I really would prefer not to share what I have, but a fool responds with insults. And Nabal goes off insulting him, and because of his foolish way, he invites a beating. Fools invite wrath. You might have known someone like this in your life. This was me as a child. It's still me in some ways as an adult, where I have an ability to say things quickly before my brain fully processes the extent of what I'm saying, what it means, right? And I just speak, and then I think as I'm speaking, it's kind of like on the same track there, and I need to slow down a minute. And I've been fortunate my whole life to avoid some of the beatings that I guarantee that I have earned through being careless with my words, right? But we've all met this person, and they're always mouthing off. They always have something to say, and oftentimes, like they say something to the wrong person, and all of a sudden there's a whole brawl, hubbub going on there, right? Because foolish people invite the wrath of others around them, right? And today we're going to focus on being foolish or being wise, and my encouragement again to you is to not be foolish. It seems straightforward. In fact, our family motto, it's 3 words, and it's very, very simple. It's don't be dumb, right? That is our family motto. We had Christmas pajamas made one year with that emblazoned on the Christmas pajamas, because if it's stupid, you really shouldn't be doing it. The fool does not heed the Higginbotham family motto, right? They barrel right past it, and because of that, they invite wrath. If you want to live underneath the wrath of God, live your life foolishly. If you want to live underneath the wrath of man, live your life foolishly, right? We are not, we need to be mindful of what our words do. And while you may think you're quick-witted, oftentimes that you're just covering up for the fact that you really are just foolish and you have not surrendered yourself to what God wants to do. I don't want you to be inviting wrath. I didn't want Nabal to invite the wrath of David, but when he insulted David, David flipped over to Proverbs 18, 6, 7 that had not yet been written, and he said, this guy is needing a beating, and we're going to go give it to him right now. And so David straps up his army. They're going down there, 400 men against a bunch of shearers. This is not going to be a good fight for Nabal and his family. I don't know what shearers have. I've played Minecraft. They have shears, right, that you can make. I think that's basically the weapon of choice that they have. So basically scissors against men with swords. It's not going to be fair. David's men are men of war. The shearers are men of cutting wool. It is not going to be pretty. So what happens next? Thank you for asking. I appreciate y'all. You're just sticking with me. Well, the story continues from there, and one of the young men who works for Nabal, who watched Nabal insult David's men, goes to Nabal's wife. And Nabal's wife is the counterbalance for Nabal. Nabal is the fool. Abigail is the wise. And he goes to Abigail and he says, hey, your dummy husband did this. And he explains what the dummy husband said and what the foolish husband did. And Abigail's like, oh. And you've got to imagine this is not her first time cleaning up after his mess. I imagine there's many times that my wife has to clean up after my messes whenever I say something foolish. And it's not her first time. She rolls her eyes and she's like, okay, so let's deal with this now. Right? And so Abigail is probably old hat for her to deal with her foolish husband doing foolish things. And so what she does is, without her husband knowing, she gathers the supplies to give to David. She gathers wine, she gathers meat, she gathers fruits and nuts, and she gets them on some donkeys, and she sends them to David. She sends them off to David, and she herself rides with them to go and to offer this to David. Verse 23, when Abigail saw David, she hurried, she got down from her donkey, she fell before David on her face, she bowed to the ground, and she fell at his feet, and she said, on me alone, my Lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant. Let not my Lord regard this worthless fellow Nabal, that's her husband, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, because the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from saving with your own hand. Now then, let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be as Nabal. And now let this present that your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Forgive the trespasses of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you as long as you live. Right? And so she goes to David, and she falls on her face, and she has the whole herd of donkeys filled with goods to give to David and his men, about 600 total men, 400 in the battle, 200 back home with the baggage. It's a lot of food that she's bringing. This is more than I expect you to bring to the potluck next week, okay? You just need to bring enough to feed kind of your family, okay? But she's bringing enough to feed an army, literally. And she rides in, she falls in front of David, and she pleads for David. She says, please let your wrath turn away. Don't try to save with your own hand. Fight the Lord's battles. Don't try to bring deliverance, working salvation with your own hand. Right? And through this, the heart of David begins to soften. Because as we learn in Proverbs 15:1, you can flip back over there, it's good fun here, guys. But as we learn in Proverbs 15:1, it says this, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Right? And so she enters and goes to David and gives him a soft answer to turn away wrath. If you're dealing with someone who is set on doing destruction and you want to pursue after wisdom, don't be like Nabal and answer in a way that is foolish, that invites wrath. Instead, use a soft answer, because the Bible tells us a soft answer turns away wrath. So when she goes to David and she prostrates herself and she begins to share her belief that David is righteous in what he's doing, right? She's making David able to turn his mind to do something righteous. Sometimes we don't give people a chance to do the right thing because we make them become entrenched in an argument. Maybe you've argued with someone before and you're on opposite sides of this, and at a right moment, if you were to soften a little bit, if you were just to soften a touch with your spouse or your coworker, whoever it is you're arguing with, you can give them an escape to save face, and then you can find peace in the midst of that. But if you go hard at them all the time, people become more defensive, they become more entrenched in their positions, and they never feel the freedom to change their mind, because if they were to change their mind, they know they would be overrun by you because you're attacking them. So when we're in arguments, especially like I think about inside of marriage, because I've seen some of you argue in your marriage. I'm unfamiliar with what that would look like in my marriage, but I'm sure y'all have experienced this at some point in your marriage where you've been on opposite sides. And if you just keep going full at it, and nobody's willing to soften just a little bit and give someone an exit off of the conflict will go on all night long. It'll wake up the next morning, and the conflict will still be there, present. Right? A gentle answer, a soft answer turns away wrath. And this isn't just the woman's job just because Abigail does this. Men, this is one way you can lead inside of your family, is to find paths to soften your tone, to allow the argument, the fight, the quarrel to cease so that wrath can be turned away from. Like living in a house that's full of wrath and strife and anger is no good. Right? It's not a pleasant place to be. And it will stay like that until one of you softens. So who should be the one who gives the soft answer to turn away the wrath in your marriage? The answer is you. You're the one. You say, well, what about him? Yes, him too. No, but you're the one. Because you are in control of what you do. I tell my kids this often. I can't control what anyone else does to me. I have no control over how any of you treat me. After this sermon, you guys can walk out that back door and say, you are a worthless pastor. I hate you. I despise everything about you. And I have no power to change how you feel in that moment. But I do control how I respond in those situations. Each of us has that responsibility. If we want to be as the wise, we give soft answers. It's not to say that you can't hold your position, but you can hold your position while giving someone an opportunity to exit from the conflict. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So Abigail goes and makes peace. Soft answer turns away wrath, further illustrating Proverbs. Pick up in verse 32. David responds to Abigail. And David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. Blessed be your discretion, and blessed be you, who have kept me this day from blood guilt and from working salvation with my own hand. For as surely as the Lord of God, the God of Israel lives, who has restrained me from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, truly by morning there would not be one left to Nabal, so much as one male. And David received from her hand what she had brought him, and he said to her, go up in peace to your house. See, I've obeyed your voice, and I have granted your petition. This is a growth moment for David, right? Because David is going to be the king of Israel. And when he was wronged, his natural inclination was to go and kill those who wronged him. That was his I'm going to go to war. You have insulted me. This is an honor situation. I will kill you. Abigail comes and basically pleads and says, don't seek after deliverance with your own hand. Trust in God. Here's some stuff. Don't do this. And David hears her. He listens to what she says. And he says, you have saved me from blood guilt, the guilt of shedding blood. Because I was going to kill every single person here. And I was going to work deliverance with my own strength and my own hand. And that would have been wrong. And so what does David do? What does David illustrate in this? Well, if you flip over to Proverbs chapter 13, verse 6, we have this verse right here. It says, righteousness guards him whose way is blameless, but sin overthrows the wicked. I don't think that's the verse I wanted to tell y'all, but we're going to leave it there anyways. It was supposed to be kind of like a listen to wise counsel verse, so sorry about that. It's in Proverbs, okay, in there. Generally, we should go and seek out wise counsel. Yeah, the wise take advice. That's a failure on your pastor's part. It's in Proverbs. Read the entirety of Proverbs. Come back next week. Tell me where it is, okay? But the wise people take advice from wise counselors. I was doing my Bible reading this morning, and my Bible reading is... it's all over the place. I've already read Proverbs, and I've read most of Psalms, but now I'm back in Kings, And we have Solomon's son Rehoboam. And when Rehoboam becomes the king of Israel, of all of Israel, he's Solomon's son. So this is David's grandson. And Solomon was a pretty hard king. And so Solomon's advisors come to Rehoboam and they say, hey, Rehoboam, like your dad was pretty harsh, but he was really, really smart. And so people listened to him and admired him. But if you want people to follow you, you can't be like your dad. You're not him. You need to soften a little bit. You need to ease back on the taxes. You need to be a little softer in this moment. And had Rehoboam listened to that counsel, the whole story of the Old Testament would have been different. But instead, Rehoboam goes to his friends, his peers, the guys who are his age, and he says, hey, what do you think I should do? And they said, here's what you do, Rehoboam. You go and you tell those guys, Jeroboam and his friends who want you to be nicer to them, you tell them, look, you thought my dad was hard. My dad beat you with whips. I'm going to beat you with scorpions. And you let them know that you're going to stand on top of them. And that's what he does. He listens to his friends. He listens to the wrong counselors. A wise person listens to the right counselors. When Rehoboam listened to the wrong counselors, you know what happened? The kingdom of Israel split in half. That's why you have all throughout Kings and Chronicles, it says like the nation of Judah, the nation of Israel. The reason there's two of them instead of one unified nation of Israel, right, is because Rehoboam listened to the wrong counselors. David heard wise counsel from Abigail, and he heeded the wise counsel that Abigail gave him. He said, that is good counsel. I should listen to that. You need to be sure that you have good counselors in your life. The wise take advice from people who are wise as well. So who are those people in your life who can be wisdom and giving you wisdom in your life? I don't know. Maybe me sometimes. Or if you come to me and you're in the midst of a hard situation, you want to know what to do. Like, I am not infinitely wise. I am not Solomon, but I love the Lord, and I'll do my very best to give you wisdom in that moment. But also other brothers and sisters in Christ who know the Lord, who have been walking with Jesus for a long time. It is a blessing to have a church family that you can go to. Sunday school teachers, small group leaders, deacons, women who are in leadership in our church and providing like meaningful like understanding of the world around us. Go and talk to them. Get counsel. Don't respond out of your own emotions. Take advice. Wise people take advice. Fools spurn the advice of the righteous. And how does the story end? Well, Abigail returns back to her husband, verse 35. She came to Nabal, and behold, he was holding a feast in his house like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until the morning light. And in the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him all the things. And his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. And about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. Right? So this is the end of Nabal's life. His wife tells him at the next day after his, I guess he's mid-hangover probably, but goes into him and says, hey, so you know how you wanted to not give David any stuff? I gave him some stuff because he was about to kill you and everybody with you. And Nabal at this point feels dishonored as well, and he is heartbroken, I guess. I don't know. His heart breaks. And he dies about a week and a half later. Right? And so we need to be mindful that there's consequences to living as the fool. What does that look like? Proverbs 19:3. Proverbs 19:3 says, when a man's folly brings his way to ruin, his heart rages against the Lord. The consequences of living a life as a fool will ultimately be ruin. Maybe it'll be the ruin of your finances. You see people who are very, very foolish in how they do things, and it'll be the ruin of their finances. Maybe it'll be the ruin of your health. Living as a fool will definitely have negative health consequences. Maybe it'll be the ruin of your relationships, your career, your marriage, your relationship with your children, right? Like the fool has consequences in all of those areas. But ultimately, when a fool rages enough, right, that rage, he rages not just against fellow man, he rages against the Lord. And Nabal had made himself an enemy of the Lord because he made himself an enemy of the Lord's anointed. And I don't know about you. In fact, I think I do know about you in this situation. I do not want to be an enemy of the God who can speak a word and make the universe come into existence. Nabal had no concern about being an enemy of that God, and when he raged against the Lord, he felt the wrath of God against him. Fools will live underneath the wrath of God. So what can you do? What do you do for all this information? We have, oh, by the way, the actual end of the story I'll summarize because it's, I guess, happily ever after. I don't know. Nabal dies. David goes and says, hey, Abigail, I'd like to marry you. And so he marries the wise woman. That's his second wife. Not great. So he marries Abigail and brings her home to be with him. That's the way the story ends. It actually shows some like, I guess I'll explain this real quick. The entirety of the Old Testament has one purpose and one purpose only. It's to show us that we're sinful and that we need someone to solve the sin problem in the Old Testament. And this begins in Genesis chapter 3 when the fall of man happens. And in there, when the woman is being cursed, like her part of the curse, it says, like the serpent will bite your heel, but your seed will crush his head. And the idea is that there's going to be a child that will come from a woman one day who will crush the head of the serpent, and it will reverse the curse of Genesis chapter 3. The entirety of the Old Testament is trying to figure out who is the seed of the woman. And at this point, this is the time, the end of this chapter right here, is actually when we find out that it's not David. Because David goes on to polygamy and violating the commands that God has. And we see like it's going to be a child of David, but David's not the answer. Right? So that's not the answer. So there's kind of a negative in there. So what do we do with the information about wisdom and folly? Well, what we do is we commit ourselves to living a life that pursues after wisdom. You can do that just as I did for years reading the book of Proverbs every month. You can pick up. It will not take you long to read Proverbs chapter 22 today. You can do it probably before I finish talking today. Don't, though. Listen to me, okay, please. All right, take a few minutes. And you can read Proverbs 22, and tomorrow you can read Proverbs 23 and Proverbs 24 the next day, and I think you understand the gist of where I'm getting at here. Commit yourselves to learning wisdom, what God's wisdom is, and then be wise and live. Right? Be wise and live. Don't just like read wisdom, apply wisdom to your life, and when you do that, you will live as the Ten Commandments, we have the fourth commandment, honor your father and mother, because there's a promise that goes with it. For it will be long, and it will be long for you as you dwell in the land the Lord your God is giving you. There's a promise for those who will live their lives in line with what God wants, that there's blessings that follow there. Sometimes they'll be here on earth. Definitely they'll be in eternity. Be wise and live. What is the beginning of wisdom? Well, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And what does proper fear of the Lord look like? It looks like respecting that you are not God. That there is a God who is different than you and surrendering yourself to be underneath his rule and reign. Recognize the consequences of your sin separates you from that God, and Jesus Christ died on the cross to bridge that gap. Today, if you want to be wise, you cannot be truly wise outside of a relationship with Jesus Christ. It cannot be done. You can be smart. You can have knowledge that far surpasses anything that I could ever imagine. But if you do not know Jesus Christ as your Savior, you have no beginning for the steps of wisdom. It's like trying to run to first base without ever hitting the ball. You have made a mistake. So guys, what I want to encourage you today, if you don't know Jesus, seek Jesus today. He can be found, and wisdom will follow. If you do know Jesus, what I want to encourage you to do is to begin to commit yourself to learning what a wise life looks like, and then to work to apply those things. So for me, what that looks like is to slow down in my responses to things. Like that's my take-home point for me as your pastor. Like, don't respond immediately. Think for a second. I've shared before, I worked for a man early on in my ministry. I was an intern at a church. I was 18 years old. I worked for a man named Rick Ellis. I think Rick may still be serving in a church in Arkansas somewhere. Hey, Rick. He was the education minister at our church. I worked underneath him doing all sorts of stuff. at a pretty good sized church in Sugar Land, Texas. And Rick, I would ask him a question. And it would be a very simple question. It'd be like, Rick, where do you want me to put these files? Now, if you ask me where you want me to put files, I'll tell you like there or there or there. Rick, when you ask him any question, I mean literally any question, he would do this. I guess you can put them anywhere. And after you ask Rick about 12 questions and you wait 10 seconds, and 10 seconds feels like forever on a very neutral question. You ask him, you say, Rick, why does it take you so long to answer questions? And he says, the Bible says to be slow to speak. He waited like 10 seconds to tell me this, by the way. He says, the Bible says to be slow to speak. And I'm really practicing that. And I thought, good for you, Rick. I'm still a work in progress on it. It's where if honestly, what I know I have to do is just be slow to speak, because I am quick-witted and funny. I put this in, my wife tells me I'm not funny often, usually because I'm quick-witted and foolish. I mean, there's a difference between being foolish and funny, honestly. So that's my point. That's how I can begin to apply wisdom better in my life. You have something inside of this book of Proverbs that God has given us, right, that you can apply to your life as well. Maybe you need to beware the adulteress. You do need to beware the adulteress, but maybe that's what you need to focus on today. I don't know, right? There's something in there for you. So I'm going to encourage you to read that, to find something in there, and to begin to apply that truth. There's a verse in Proverbs that I use as my verse to tell me to shut up. I should do it now since it's 11:35. It says, like a madman shooting flaming arrows is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, I was only joking. And the number of times that I've gone around and I've been destructive without any, just randomly just firing flaming arrows out with no concern for where they might land. And then when someone gets hurt and I'm like, I was just kidding. That's me. I know it, so I'm work in progress. Luckily, you are too. So take some time this month, read the book of Proverbs. And then find a proverb or two or three thematically that fit you and say, this is what I'm going to work on in my life. If you don't know Jesus today, though, what you need to do is you need to get to know Jesus Christ. Because you cannot apply these proverbs well. You will have no wisdom without having a proper fear of the Lord. Let me pray.